Hi, this is Representative Beth Fukumoto, and I represent Mililani, Mauka, and Waipio Gentry in the state legislature. Today we're going to be talking about the little fire ants that were recently found in my district, especially in Mililani, Mauka, and in one particular neighborhood. And I'm going to be speaking with Dr. Cass Vanderwoude and Rob Curtis from DLNR and from the Hawaii Ant Lab. Before we get started, if you guys don't mind just introducing yourselves briefly, starting with Rob.
I'm Rob Curtis with the Hawaii Department of Agriculture. I'm an entomologist. I've got about 15 years work experience in the country, across the country, and here in Hawaii 2 years.
Okay.
Hi Beth, thanks. My name's Cass. I manage the Hawaii Ant Lab.
Okay.
We're based in Hilo. We're part of the University of Hawaii, specifically the Pacific Cooperative Studies Unit, which specialises mainly in invasive species. So the species that we deal with are all the invasive ants that we have here in Hawaii, in the state, and specifically, of course, little fire ants.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's really great to have you guys, especially I know this isn't such a big deal to my district. When we heard that there were little fire ants, I think everybody got nervous, particularly I think you said something about the news, on the news about it affecting home sales and home values, which I think is completely true. That was a good thing to say, and I think it really woke people up to the seriousness of this issue. And it's something that I don't know that people recognized, at least, you know, in suburban Oahu. I don't think we realized how serious it could be before. So I really appreciate the work that you guys have done so far and just getting everybody up to speed. Just for viewers, we did have recently a town hall that you were both able to participate in, and I was very pleased with how the turnout. Were there any major takeaways that either of you had from that?
I was really pleased to see the level of involvement in the community. That's exactly what we are hoping for, is that the community gets involved and gets interested and realizes that it is a problem. So it's a good sign that we're getting our messages across.
Good, good. Now, if people are not paying attention, what is the, give me one or two reasons, Dr. Vanderwoude, if you don't mind, just what is the problem with little fire ants? Why should people be concerned? Are they just like regular red ants, or what's the biggest problem?
That's a great question, Beth. A lot of people who haven't lived with this particular species think, well, it's just another ant, and if it were to come to my house, I'll just spray it with Raid and it'll be gone. And that's not quite right. This is a particularly tenacious and very abundant pest, which has presents a lot of problems to people in and around their homes. It's an ant that actually nests up in trees as well as on the ground layer, and will also nest inside houses and forage inside houses, and it stings. So the average, in a badly infested area, the average home lot of say 10,000 square foot can have as many as 20 million of these ants. Besides stinging, they also fall out of the vegetation onto people, stinging them once they land, as well as affecting pets and other animals that would live like around the home. So what we see on the east coast of Hawaii Island quite frequently in areas that are infested is that the domestic pets, people's pet cats and dogs, will eventually become blinded and will suffer from horrible rashes. So it's a pest that affects people and also affects the environment and also affects our domestic animals as well.
So this is not something that's just a concern for, say, an agricultural area. It would be problematic for suburban.
Yeah, it really affects all segments of society. It's a very bad environmental pest. Once it's in a natural area, it will drive away most other birds and animals. As an agricultural pest, it reduces the productivity especially of trees, the kind of fruits that we grow here, which tend to be very susceptible to mealybugs and scale insects. And it's a pest of people in and around their homes as well. So it does affect everybody.
I think that's something that in Mililani we recently realized. It's something that people don't always pay attention to, as we said, but a lot of people did come out, and a lot of that was because you guys had a good initial response, I thought.
Initially we got a report that there were ants in Mililani Mauka that may be little fire ant. The sample came into the department, and we identified that it was little fire ant, and we sent out a crew to survey the area, survey the home. It turned out that it was over many homes, and we didn't have a large enough crew to survey the entire area. So we mobilized more people from multiple agencies to come out to Mililani-Malka and do what we call a delimiting survey. And what that is we survey the entire area and then plot all of our survey points on a map, and we can see visually where the infestation is. We found that it covered about 18 properties in a gulch area. And from then, we met with the community at that town hall to give the larger community more information about what's going on and how we're going to be dealing with this. And then since then, Dr. Vanderwoude has met with the community that actually has little fire ants and those homeowners and developed a treatment plan specifically for those properties. And this week they're going out and beginning treatment.
Great, great. Yeah, I think the quick response was very helpful, and I know you mentioned you do believe that you're going to be able to eradicate the ants. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe we can. We've successfully achieved an eradication already on Maui, and also several what we call spot eradications, where we have managed to eradicate it from a small area of land of one or more acres. So the Mililani situation is it's a little bit more complex because there are a lot of people living there. So we are dealing with 18 or 20 different families. So we need to basically reach out to those families, and we did that very successfully last week, I believe, so that they are aware of what we're going to do, when we're going to be there. And that they follow that we all follow the procedures that we need to follow. So every one of those families, if they have a dog or a cat, the dog or a cat needs to be taken away from the yard while we're doing the treatment. And of course, the people need to allow us on their property. So we all kind of hooed in, and we're working together as a group, the community and myself and my staff, to rid ourselves of this particular problem.
Great. Great. Well, and are there any other areas besides what's being currently treated that you guys have found yet?
Yeah, so here on Oahu, we know that little fire ant is also established in Waimanalo, in some state ag land. It's a abandoned lot and also a gulch area that's infested. And we're also treating that area. It's a different area because it's not residential. So in terms of the actual treatment and working with the community, it's a different level of involvement. In Mililani, because it's residential, we need to get full buy-in from those homeowners. If there's one home that doesn't allow the treatment, it won't work for anyone.
Okay. And when we talked earlier, you said that what can happen if one home doesn't allow it, then the ants will all go there and then spread back out. Is that correct?
It's not that they would go there. It's just that they would be able to survive there.
Okay. And perhaps build out from there. Is that correct? Okay. So the idea is behind eradication is that you would need to get everything taken care of before you can be sure that they're actually out of the area. Okay. Now, we've actually had a lot of other people testing, I believe, in my area. And has anything else come out positive?
As of now, no.
Okay.
We've gotten over 100 samples from Mililani-Malka back. As of right now, no new positives. We're continuing to get more samples back to the department, and we will follow up on all those samples. Even if it's negative, we get back to people and let them know that their sample was negative. It won't be a surprise to us if we find more areas on Oahu that are infested. Hopefully nothing as big or bigger than Mililani-Malka. Right.
Now, the Mililani-Malka infestation, you had mentioned that it was bigger than you initially thought. Is that correct?
Right, because the initial sample that came in was just one house, and we were not expecting that it was going to be over 18 houses, a gulch, and 2 streets. It was an indication to us that it had been there for quite some time, and once we started talking to the homeowners, we found out that some of them had been noticing them in their homes being stung at night for as many as 4 years.
Wow.
And like I said, that's an indication to us that it's been there for quite some time, unreported.
as I've been walking door to door talking to people about this, I let them know that story that, you know, if you're getting bit by ants in your house, please make sure that you do the test and you send in your sample. So hopefully you guys are getting some samples because we're talking to people and encouraging them. And I think sometimes, especially in Mililani, because it was former agricultural lands, we have so many ants. I regularly fight battles with black ants, and people have red ants and all sorts of ants in their houses. So they don't think a whole lot of it. So I can see where that might happen. But I think you are both doing a great job, and your organizations are doing a great job of making sure people understand the difference between just a regular red ant or black ant. Now, what I did also want to talk to you about, because one thing that keeps coming up when I go door to door, people say, well, we're paying for pest control already. We have somebody coming in once a month or once every 2 months, and they're taking care of my ants, so I don't need to worry about this. Is that true, or should those people still be concerned?
Beth, there's a big difference between pest control and trying to eradicate something.
Okay.
Trying to eradicate something is actually quite difficult and complex. And pest control is really about managing a particular problem, and by managing it means reducing the size of or the density of a particular pest species to a level that it's no longer a bother. Trying to eradicate something means that you need to actually find and then kill every last individual of that particular pest. So pest controllers are excellent, highly trained people that are very good at managing these problems, minimising pesticide use, and of course minimising the cost to a homeowner. And eradication is extremely expensive, very time consuming, so the eradication of Mililani will take us 4 years. There's 1 year of that will be of actually doing treatments, but there'll be 3 years where we have to continue to come back and survey and resurvey and monitor to make sure that we've found that very last ant. So pest controllers do a particular job that's extremely valuable, and they're very good at it. And the way they do it minimises the cost of dealing with the problem for a homeowner. But trying to eradicate something is it's quite a bit different. I've managed pest control companies as well as managed eradications, so they are very different kind of exercises.
So should we be suggesting to people that do have pest control monthly, should we be suggesting that they ask their pest control company to be looking out for little fire ants, or should they be testing some other way?
I think most pest control companies work inside and immediately adjacent to the homes, to the actual structures, where little fire ants are normally found, is because most invasive species are sneaky. So they'll go and live in places in a yard where perhaps people don't go so often. So it's really the whole yard that people need to be looking at. So if a homeowner or a resident has a pest control service, that's great. Perhaps what they should then be doing is being very careful about checking the rest of the yard to make sure there are no fire ants there. And I think you were about to show us at some point exactly how that can be done, and really how easy it is to go through that process.
Yes, well, this is probably a decent time to talk about it. You both would probably be better at showing people what to do, but what we've been doing in my office is just going door to door and we're passing out these little bags, and just Ziploc bags and some chopsticks, which both of your websites explain that you basically just have to break up the chopsticks right in half and dip it in peanut butter, a thin amount of peanut butter, right, so it's not difficult to spot the ants, and put it around your property, right? And now one of the things that I believe you said was that it should be near the shady areas because they don't like the sun. Is that correct? Okay.
They prefer shady, damp, cool areas.
Okay, so under plants and that sort of thing. Okay, so places where people may have already seen ants or they suspect that there could be a problem. Is that?
That's funny. We have over 50 species of ants here in Hawaii. And most ants are sun-loving animals. They like to be out in the open. And little fire ants are very different because they're actually a rainforest species. So they like to be in areas that are more like a rainforest.
Okay.
But if you look at either the DOA website or our website, which is called littlefireants.com, right on the front page we have a video or a link to a video that was done by one of the biologists from the US Fish and Wildlife Service, and it shows exactly how you could go through and exactly where to place those chopsticks with the peanut butter on it.
Okay. And as soon as we're done here, we're going to make sure to get all that stuff up on my website, repbeth.com, and we'll link to the Department of Agriculture's site as well as the Hawaii Ant Lab. Yep. Because I know you guys have already done a lot of work in making sure that the flyers are very explanatory on how to do this. And I think the number one thing that people need to know is that it's only an hour. It only takes an hour to get this done. And people think that it's going to be a much more involved process than that. And you basically need to just do this with the peanut butter, right? Put it around your house and wait an hour, go back and check it, and then put it in this bag and put it in the freezer. And then after 24 hours, put it in the envelope that my office also gave everybody and just mail it. Is that pretty much it?
As long as we have their contact information,
right.
we can get back in touch with them.
Okay, so that's right. Make sure that you write your information on the bag.
Or on a piece of paper.
Okay, okay.
The one thing we have noticed is with some people, they ring us up and say, oh, we sent you a sample last week, but you didn't call me back. And what happens is people put a normal postage stamp on the envelope, and the US Postal Service weighs it and says, oh, it's a little bit too heavy. Okay. And because it's got the stick in it, it makes the envelope a bit fatter. So just be very careful about the actual amount of postage that you put on the envelope.
That is something that we should perhaps add to our kit. Just make sure people know, because that's true. Yeah,
so
not everybody would think of that.
So we have had some of these samples lost in the mail. It's very unfortunate, but once the people ring us, then we can obviously we can fill them in. But that has happened a few times.
Okay, well, good. That's something that I'll add to my door-to-door speech.
Great.
Okay. Well, one of the other questions that I get asked a lot is, where did the fire ants come, or the little fire ants come from?
This population that we have here in Hawaii, both on the Big Island and on Oahu, is genetically most similar to the little fire ants that are found in Florida.
Okay.
Originally, little fire ants are from South America in rainforests, as Cass mentioned. We don't know exactly how we got them, but we do know that they're genetically most similar to the Florida ants. Okay.
And so this is not the same thing as, say, I have some family in North Carolina that is dealing with fire ants, but they're much bigger. And then I've run into a lot of constituents from Texas who say, oh yeah, we have those. They're big ants, and that's what people seem to be looking for. Those are different ants, is that correct?
Those are different fire ants. There's a lot of ants that are called fire ants, which is why sometimes it can be a bad common name to call them fire ants.
Okay. And these, can you give me a slight description of them?
They're about 1 millimeter in size. I'm sorry, that's metric, because that's less than 1/16 of an inch long.
So very tiny.
So they're very, very small. And they're about the same length as the width of a penny. Strangely enough, they're also about the same colour as a penny. So they're kind of an orangey salmon colour, and they are really, really tiny. Compared with the red imported fire ants, which we see in Texas and North Carolina, they're actually very easy to deal with because, first of all, they live on the ground in mounds, so you can see where the nest is. You can never see where these nests are. And they also don't fall on you. So the people in Texas, they just have to deal with the ants on the ground. And the red imported fire ants in Texas are very similar to our red ants. They're actually sister species. So little fire ants are nothing like that. Most people that have little fire ants would much rather have red imported fire ants.
Now you mentioned a little bit about the one type being on the ground, but this one you had said earlier is also in trees. Well, how does that affect the treatment? And since you're starting treatment this week, what's the treatment going to be like?
Actually, it makes it very difficult because if this was just a ground-dwelling species, there are lots of products that we can buy in the store that that have been developed as the result of research that we can spread on the ground, and most of those are granular. They're a solid granule. Little fire ants can live. If you had a coconut palm in your yard that was 100 foot tall and you had fire ants, they'd be at the very top of that coconut palm. So we've developed a gel bait, which I've been working on for about 10 years. And it's more of a consistency of ketchup or something like that. So it's very thick, like and viscous. And then with the help of some other people on the Big Island, we developed ways that we can actually shoot that up into the trees, and it sticks to the vegetation. So the bait, we can actually get the bait up to where those ants are, and that's really the key to trying to eradicate these, because previously we were trying to deal with these ants on the ground, and we could very successfully deal with those. But then the ones up in the trees would look down and go, oh look, there's some real estate down there. We can move down there now. So there was a cycle of dealing with them on the ground and having the ones in the trees come back down and reinfest those areas.
Okay, well, we're really glad that you've taken so much time and had to work on this on other islands, because at least you seem to have the system down, which is good. I'm really glad that you're confident that we'll be able to eradicate them. People have been very happy to hear that, as I've been telling them that. Well, one of the other things, we continue to have invasive species problems in Hawaii, and part of it is that your department's underfunded, I'm sure. But can you tell me a little bit about what you think we need to do from the Department of Agriculture perspective, perhaps, to make sure that we sort of don't have as many of these problems in the future?
I guess the main thing that we could ask the public to do is to be very aware of the things that they're bringing to Hawaii. And I would say the majority of invasive species that come to Hawaii are brought unintentionally by people moving goods from the mainland, from overseas to Hawaii. And it may be completely unintentional. They move their car from the mainland and it happens to have an invasive species in it. It's not their fault and it wasn't their intention. But it's very simple to do. So in terms of preventing invasive species, it really starts with everyone in Hawaii being aware of what they're bringing here and the risks involved. The Department of Ag has the amnesty bins at the airports, and the reason for that is because we don't want pests coming here to Hawaii. We don't have enough people to inspect every bag and every person coming off the airport, so we ask people to self-inspect.
Is it impossible to have enough people, do you think? How much manpower would that take?
I don't know how much manpower it would take, but it would take a lot more than what we have.
I'm sure.
It would take a lot more than double what we have right now.
Okay. And your office is dealing with not just the little fire ants, you're dealing with other invasive species as well, right?
Right. So my branch is the plant pest control branch, and we deal with the species that are either in the very beginning stages of becoming established in Hawaii. We have the chemical mechanical control section, which is more of a rapid response section. We also have a biological control section, which deals with insects that have become fully established in the state. Also invasive plants that have become established in the state. So we have a lot of different organisms that we're working on. Little fire ant is just one of many. To give a quick count, I can probably come up with about 30 that we're working on.
Okay. So has this sidetracked you at all from other projects, this new infestation?
No, it hasn't sidetracked us, but because we're so low staffed, we have to spend maybe more time on little fire ants than on other ones. That doesn't mean that we've stopped work on other species. We still have a lot of work to do on other invasive species. But it is a focus right now is little fire ants, and it always has been. Because since 1999, when little fire ant first showed up on the Big Island, we have been very aware of the fact that it could eventually come to Oahu, also Maui and Kauai, and establish populations, and we were trying to prevent that from happening.
Now, are they on any other islands besides Oahu and the Big Island?
Yes, there's a small population on Kauai that's also being dealt with by Dr. Vanderwoude's lab. They're working towards an eradication on that. And there's also a small population on Maui that is also being eradicated at the moment.
Now, is there a point at which you can't eradicate them anymore? That we just have to live with them?
Yeah, and it's a very difficult decision to make, and it's a very difficult assessment to make. Quite often, it's an economic barrier. in a past position, I worked in Brisbane with a red importer fire ant eradication program, and they spent $300 million to date trying to eradicate red imported fire ants. So technically there probably isn't a technical point where you can't eradicate, but practically it's going to be an economic line in the sand, if you like.
Okay.
So I recently did some work with an economic analyst who, together we tried to work out what the impact was of little fire ants on the Big Island. And they did a quick estimate, or actually a fairly detailed estimate, what they thought it would cost to eradicate LFA from the Big Island. And they thought it would be about $870 million. I don't think the legislature is going to give me $870 million. So it gets to a point where it's simply too expensive. In the case of little fire ants, up until recently, we didn't have a technical solution, which made it even more difficult. But we now have a technical solution. The problem would be an economic one and a practical one. If you're covering a very large area of land, it's possible that somebody in that area of land living there is not going to allow you on their property, or is going to be obstructive, or there are parts of certain features in the landscape where you can't reach. So it's a difficult question, very, very difficult to answer.
If I can just speak on what we've spent to date on Oahu, so this is from January. We are not the only organizations. The Hawaii Ant Lab and the Department of Agriculture are also working in conjunction with several other agencies, including the Oahu Invasive Species Committee. All total, we've spent about $250,000 since January on little fire ant. So it can be very expensive very quickly, and that's only 2 infestations that we are aware of.
Right. And I'm assuming that probably doesn't even cover all of the money that you're going to need to deal with these current infestations.
No, that's only what we spent
so far. Yeah, okay. And treatment's only starting right now in Mililani Mauka.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So definitely expensive, and I think we're actually running out of time, but what I would want to point out for viewers is that, as we've heard, we're understaffed and it's an expensive process, but if we catch it in time, it's much easier to deal with, and it's something that we can deal with and we can do. So if people continue to just test their yards, use the kits that we're passing out, make sure you put enough postage on it. But if people stay aware, then it's something that we can deal with, at least on Oahu. Is there anything else that either one of you wanted to add?
That's exactly what the Department of Ag is asking, is that everyone on Oahu is aware of this as a problem and is engaged. We want people to test their yards and send them to us. Send the samples to us. We'll get back to you. Even if it's negative, we'll let you know. The sooner that we catch them, the better for everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, early detection is the key to dealing with any invasive species. The most expensive and time-consuming part of managing an invasive species is early detection, finding it. If people can find little fire ant infestations before they get too large, we can deal with it very effectively. But it's the finding it that's the hard part. So the concept of having as many people as possible check their backyards, check the areas where they live for little fire ants, the more likely it is that we can actually effectively deal with it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for all the work you're doing in our community. We're really excited that you have been able to do as much as you have. And just for the viewers, everything else that we have, there's a lot more that we didn't get to talk about yet, but it's going to go up on my website, and we'll have a special section that will talk about the little fire ant and how we're dealing with it, other information as it comes out. So thank you again for being here, and thank you for watching.
You're welcome.
Thank you.